Addiction. It's a word often associated with drugs and alcohol. However, addiction extends far beyond these substances. Addiction is a complex process. It involves an intense craving for something. This craving drives a person to seek it out despite negative consequences. Addiction is about seeking pleasure or relief. This relief is often short-lived. Over time, the addiction causes harm. This harm can be physical, emotional, or social. It can impact relationships, work, and overall well-being. Think of addiction as a cycle. It starts with a craving. This craving leads to a behavior. The behavior provides temporary relief, but then the craving returns. This cycle continues, often with devastating results. Addiction is not a choice. It is a complex interplay of factors. These factors include genetics, environment, and life experiences. To understand addiction, we need to look beyond the behavior itself. We must examine the underlying causes and the impact on the individual. At its core, addiction is a brain-based phenomenon. The human brain is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. This is essential for survival. We are driven to engage in behaviors that promote our well-being. These behaviors include eating, sleeping, and connecting with others. When we experience pleasure, our brain releases dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It plays a crucial role in the brain's reward system. It creates feelings of pleasure and reinforces the behavior that led to the release. This is how we learn to repeat actions that are beneficial for us. Addiction hijacks this reward system. Addictive substances and behaviors trigger a surge of dopamine. This surge is often much larger than what we experience naturally. This creates an intense feeling of pleasure. Over time, the brain becomes accustomed to this dopamine overload. This leads to tolerance. We need more of the substance or behavior to achieve the same effect. We also experience withdrawal when we don't get it. This withdrawal can be physical or emotional. It drives us to seek out the source of our addiction, even when we know it's harmful. Addiction is not limited to substances like drugs and alcohol. It can manifest in various behaviors. These behaviors activate the same reward pathways in the brain. They lead to the same cycle of craving, seeking, and negative consequences. Gambling is one example. The thrill of winning triggers a dopamine rush. This rush reinforces the desire to gamble, even when facing significant losses. Sex addiction involves compulsive engagement in sexual activities. It often leads to relationship problems and emotional distress. Shopping addiction is characterized by excessive buying. This buying provides a temporary mood boost, but it can lead to financial ruin and clutter. Workaholism involves an unhealthy obsession with work. It often stems from a need for validation or a fear of failure. These are just a few examples of behavioral addictions. They highlight the fact that addiction is not simply about substances. It's about the brain's reward system being hijacked by a behavior or substance. This hijacking leads to a compulsive drive to repeat that behavior, despite negative consequences. The American Society for Addiction. Medicine recognizes addiction as a brain disorder. This disorder is characterized by changes in brain structure and function. These changes affect the brain's reward, motivation, and memory circuits. This recognition underscores the biological basis of addiction. Genetics play a significant role in addiction vulnerability. Research suggests that certain genes can influence our susceptibility to developing an addiction. These genes can affect how our brain responds to addictive substances and behaviors. They can also influence our impulsivity and risk-taking tendencies. However, genetics is not destiny. While genes can increase our risk, they do not guarantee that we will develop an addiction. Environmental factors and life experiences interact with our genes. This interaction shapes our vulnerability to addiction. Understanding the biological basis of addiction helps to reduce stigma. It highlights the fact that addiction is not a moral failing. It's a complex medical condition that requires compassionate treatment and support. Section 5. The power of connection, attachment, and endorphins in human survival. Humans are social creatures. We are wired for connection. From the moment we are born, we rely on others for survival. Our brains are programmed to seek out attachment figures. These figures provide us with safety, security, and love. Endorphins play a crucial role in this attachment process. Endorphins are naturally occurring Opioids, our brains produce them. They act on the same receptors as opioid drugs. However, unlike external opioids, endorphins are not inherently harmful. They promote well-being and social bonding. When we experience physical touch, love, and connection, our brains release endorphins. These endorphins create feelings of pleasure, calm, and security. They reduce pain and stress. This is why we find comfort in the arms of a loved one. It's why social connection is essential for our mental and emotional health. These early experiences of attachment and endorphin release shape our brains. They influence how we relate to others throughout our lives. They lay the foundation for healthy emotional regulation and resilience. Section 6. Early disruptions, trauma's impact on endorphin systems. Early childhood experiences shape our endorphin systems. Trauma can significantly impact these systems. Trauma can take many forms: physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, neglect, witnessing violence, or unstable environments. Trauma leads to long-lasting brain changes, disrupting the endorphin system. Insufficient endorphins affect pleasure and connection, challenges in regulating emotions and coping with stress. Section 7. Seeking solace, addiction as a response to unmet needs. When we understand the impact of early trauma on the endorphin system, we can begin to see addiction in a new light. Addiction, in many cases, is not a moral failing or a lack of willpower. It is often a desperate attempt to cope with unhealed trauma and unmet needs. Individuals who have experienced early trauma often struggle with emotional regulation, self-worth, and the ability to form healthy attachments. They may feel a deep sense of emptiness, shame, or loneliness. These feelings can be incredibly painful and difficult to bear. Addictive substances and behaviors provide a temporary escape from this pain. They trigger the release of dopamine, providing a surge of pleasure or relief. This relief can be incredibly seductive, especially for someone who has difficulty experiencing these feelings naturally. Furthermore, addictive behaviors can provide a sense of control in a world that feels chaotic and unpredictable. They can offer a way to numb out painful emotions or to avoid uncomfortable social situations. In essence, addiction becomes a maladaptive coping mechanism. It's an attempt to find solace and self-medication in the absence of healthy coping skills and support. Section 8. The cycle of addiction, from temporary relief to long-term harm. The tragedy of addiction is that while it offers temporary relief, it ultimately perpetuates the cycle of pain and suffering. The initial euphoria or numbness that accompanies addictive behaviors is fleeting. It's always followed by a crash. This crash can manifest as withdrawal symptoms, increased shame and guilt, or a worsening of underlying emotional pain. This cycle of craving, using, and crashing keeps individuals trapped in the grip of addiction. As tolerance builds, they require more of the substance or behavior to achieve the same effect. This can lead to neglecting responsibilities, damaging relationships, and jeopardizing physical and mental health. Moreover, addiction often leads to isolation and secrecy. Individuals may withdraw from loved ones, ashamed of their behavior and fearful of judgment. This isolation only intensifies feelings of loneliness and despair, further fueling the addiction. The long-term consequences of addiction can be devastating. It can lead to financial ruin, legal problems, chronic health conditions, and even death. It can also have a ripple effect, impacting families, communities, and society as a whole. Section 9. Breaking free, addressing trauma to heal addiction. Breaking free from addiction requires more than willpower. It demands a compassionate approach addressing underlying trauma. Creating a safe environment helps individuals heal and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Trauma-informed therapy is crucial in addiction recovery. It recognizes trauma's impact on the brain and body. Providing a safe space to process experiences and regulate emotions is essential. Approaches like CBT, DBT, and EMDR are helpful. Support groups offer hope, belonging, and accountability. They help build essential social support networks for long-term sobriety. Section 10. Join the conversation. Subscribe for more insights on addiction and trauma. Addiction is a complex issue with far-reaching consequences. By understanding the role of early trauma, endorphin disruptions, and the brain's reward system, we can move towards a more compassionate and effective approach to treatment and prevention. This essay has only scratched the surface of this important topic. If you're interested in learning more about the connection between childhood trauma and addiction, I encourage you to subscribe to my newsletter. Together we can break the cycle of addiction and create a world where everyone has the opportunity to heal and thrive. Subscribe now to join the conversation.